We are joined today on CIVILNET by Norwegian Honorary Consul Tim Stray. Tim, thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Tim, you had 5 years experience in 2000 to 2005 helping find homes for refugees living in Armenia from the Karabakh conflict. But you're familiar with the situation that causes people to potentially stay in these homes for whatever reason. In your experiences, what were some of the reasons for situations like this?
It's a very complex set of questions. I mean, I think easily you can blame it on the economic situation in the country. The earthquake, no jobs, difficult to find work, get income, build a new house. That's the quick fix solution or explanation for the situation. I think more importantly is the psychological aspect of things. You've gone through a very significant trauma. Now, as you mentioned, my background is building houses for refugees from Azerbaijan as a result of the conflict. We noticed that people wish that time would go backwards in a way, that leaving the container or leaving whatever bad situation they lived in was very difficult for them because they've been living 20 years since the conflict, or now since the earthquake 23 years, in this bad situation, but it's still home. It's what they know. It's where they have their social networks. They have the odd job around the corner or whatever. So to turn that on its head, to move to another part of town or something like that is not an easy thing to do. And so there is resistance.
Do you have an example of what you mean by trying to turn time backwards rather than forwards?
The refugees, again in my experience, refugees, they say they want to go home. When they say they want to go home, they don't want to go home to the physical territory of Azerbaijan. They want to go back to pre-conflict Azerbaijan, to their lives before the conflict, which is not a possibility. So you notice that even when we would build a house for that refugee family next to the container that they live in, that many of them would refuse to move into that new house, thinking that that meant an acceptance of their fate. They were not going back. And they had a very tough psychological time in accepting that, even though the physical house was something much better.
So you're saying there were times when a physical house was sitting next to a container and people were choosing or would prefer to have stayed in the Domik?
Yes, it happened quite often, especially among the elderly, where their whole lives were spent in Baku or Sumgait or someplace like that, and now they come to Armenia, and this is not what they know. They probably spoke Russian there and not Armenian. Now, how do we draw that parallel over to the earthquake situation in the north of Armenia? They have their networks at least, so they do have an advantage over the refugees. They're in the same neighborhood, the same city where they lived before the earthquake. So you would think that it would be easy in this very much network-based society that Armenia is for them to find new jobs in that neighborhood or something like that. But still, it is a psychological trauma that they have been through, and it's very difficult for them. After 20 years of a common fate, these people in the containers around them have that common tragedy in their background, and so it's very difficult for someone individually or a family to break out of that and to move to another part of town, another neighborhood, even if you offer them a new house on the other side of town.
Even if it's perceived or factual that there are health risks in staying in a place like this?
Oh, they're proven health risks. I mean, living in a container, these containers are just metal boxes. And so during the summer, they're extremely hot. During the winter, they're extremely cold. It's like an oven during the summer. So the average age, life expectancy of a refugee is shorter than that of a normal citizen. And we have more deaths among babies. The young and the old suffer most living in a container.
Which leads us to a term that you've often used, and I'd like to give you the opportunity to explain it. Learned helplessness. What does it mean in this particular circumstance?
If you've been through a trauma and you've lost your house, you've lost members of your family, your city is in shambles. In the case of the refugees, you had to leave your country. And then you come here, and there are promises from the government or from international organizations, or probably both, that, oh, we're going to help you. We're going to build houses. We're going to make your life better. You learn to expect assistance. And so the ability for them to cope with that situation themselves can be damaged. And that's what we saw quite a bit among the refugees. If I can pull an example out of my experience with refugees. In a village in Kotek, we built 100 and some houses in this particular village. The owner of a carpet factory, 2 villages down, offered to employ every woman among the refugees at the carpet factory. They said, no, it's too far away, it's 2 villages away. You would think that they're refugees, they've got the house, they're desperate for work, they would gladly take that job. No. The owner of the factory offered to run a bus down to the village, pick them up, and drop them back off at the end of the working day. They still refused. He said, if he wants us to work at their factory, he has to build his factory in our village. That is the most extreme case of learned helplessness. They don't want to be helped. They want their suffering. They want their their identity is so based on this tragedy and what has happened to them that they have a very tough time crawling out of it, in a way.
Tim, thank you so much. It's hard to believe that it's been 23 years since the earthquake, but based on many of the points and reasons that you just articulated, maybe it's not totally surprising. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.